Good morning to everybody. I'm your educator and mentor, Siddhi Bangard. Let's crack it with UPSC CSE in English. So, folks, let's begin. Today, briefly about myself. 3 years of teaching experience, and I did my BE in computer sciences, appeared for civil services, 4 mains and interviews, and did my post graduation from XLRI Jamshedpur in HR. And at Unacademy, I would briefly like to tell you, you get daily live classes. All right, you can check out the Unacademy special classes schedule that I've already put up there. And some of you might have already attended my live classes on the Unacademy platform. So they are brilliant. You can directly interact with your educators, and in fact, top educators around the country you have on your screen. Live tests and quizzes. In fact, I'm conducting a prelims mock test series out there. So you get live test and quizzes to hone your preparations. And you also get detailed notes of each and every session after the session, which are already available on the website. Structured courses. All our courses are structured as per the UPSC syllabus, so that nothing is missed out from the syllabus that you're not able to do. And one subscription of Unacademy gives you unlimited access to all the other courses that we have under the UPSC CSE category. So unlike, for example, when you go to an offline class, you have to pay separately. If you earlier, I used to have two optionals. There used to be two optionals in UPSC civil services, I think before 2014. So I had public administration and geography as my optional. I had to pay separately 1 lakh rupees each to actually study both those options for 4 months. Here, under 40,000, you can study the optional and also rest of the GS courses. So I had to spend around 1 lakh on my GS courses, 1 lakh on studying for public administration, and around another 1 lakh for my geography courses when I went to study offline, plus the commutation cost. Here, all under 40,000 or under, if you take for 1 year, under 40,000 you can study all the courses, and for 2 year under 30,000 you can get unlimited access to more than 200 courses that we have on our platform, that include the recorded courses. For example, in offline classes, what happens if the good teacher goes, the courses go with him. Here, even if the educator has left the platform for some reason, his good courses still remain on our platform, and you can discover some gems. Live classes and upcoming classes all are available to somebody who has taken a any number of years subscription. If you are subscribed to our courses, you get access to all the greater than 200 courses we have on our platform, which are recorded live and upcoming. With that, we cover almost all the courses which are required for your UPSC CSE preparation, including and not excluding your answer writing courses, interview preparation courses, and essay writing courses. So we are preparing you from prelims till interviews. We will be there as your mentor, and that too at a very, very reasonable price. So the 1 year subscription cost for UPSC 2020 students is less than 40,000 if you use my code SBUS. All right, and the 2 year course, or which is more favorable for UPSC 2021 students, is available at rupees 64,000, which reduces to less than 58,000 if you use my code SBUS. That means the total course cost of the course comes less than to 30,000. And obviously, we have no cost EMI or installments available on our 6-month, 12-month, and 24-month subscription, so that you do not have to pay directly at one go. You can pay in small installments without paying any interest over them. With that, we'll proceed towards today's session, which is India IR series, India's Eastern Neighbours Part 1. So today, we'll discuss who India's neighbours are, Eastern Neighbours are. This will be a small mini series within the Asia edition series, right? So we'll discuss who India's Eastern Neighbours are, and today we are actually particularly going to discuss relationship history with Nepal. Alright, as I had told you in the last session that we'll be discussing India-Nepal relations part 1 and part 2. So I have combined it under India and its Eastern Neighbours because they share a similar history almost a similar geography. They've all been brothers. They are all a part of Indian subcontinent. Let's see how. So before that, a brief about India, but I'll come to it at a later while when I'll be talking about Nepal and how what India is actually impacts Nepal. What are Nepal's tribulations? What are Nepal's troubles regarding India? Now, in our eastern neighbors particularly, all right, we have China, one of our largest neighbors. I have already covered Indo-China relations part 1 and part 2 in detail. Everything has been covered for your mains examination. Now, if only something new happens, we'll have another video for it. But as of now, everything has been covered. Another eastern neighbor is Nepal, about which we'll be doing today. Sri Lanka is our maritime neighbor in the eastern area. Myanmar, Bhutan and Bangladesh. I will be taking separate sessions for each of them. Myanmar and Bhutan I will take together. For Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, I will take separate sessions under India's eastern neighbors. Now let's focus on India and Nepal. I asked you to do a comparison. Now, the Nepal, it shares approximately 1700 kilometers boundary with us. You know, the entire boundary around Uttar Pradesh and Bihar is actually shared by Nepal here. This entire part, and Uttarakhand is here. So this boundary is actually guarded by the SSB or Sashastra Seema Bal. The population of Nepal, as you can see, is minuscule, is almost, I don't know, 1/6, 1/7, 1/8, 1/10 of India. So the population is very, very less, but there's a very common combining factor. Both are predominantly, India and Nepal are predominantly Hindu nations. Hindi is well spoken both in India and in Nepal. They share open borders and a lot of closely related customs due to regional ties, religional ties, strong religional ties. Both are Hindu nations, so most of the festivals, most of the cultures, most of the ritual is actually exactly same in India and Nepal. Nepal is just our Himalayan brother, all right? Now, look at the difference in the GDP. There's this $30 billion and ours is $3 trillion. There's a huge difference in the GDP. Primary one is because of the size, but obviously size does not matter here because Singapore again has a very, very high GDP compared to India. Now, but what is the difference? Where did Nepal lag around? Because if you see closely, it has a GDP slightly above only Bhutan. So why has that happened? Because Nepal has a very, very long period of political turmoil. I will be talking about that right now. In fact, I don't know, most of my students must have been kids when that great Nepal royalty massacre happened in 2001, when the Nepali prince shot his entire family. People have given it a love angle, but there are some other angles also that were being explored at that point of time. So Nepal has had a long history of political turmoil, and India has been hand-holding Nepal through all those years of turmoil, but not very efficiently. Otherwise, our eastern neighbor would have been on its feet, up and running by now. But let's see how India-Nepal relationships have run. So we'll study that from 18th century onwards till the 2010s. We'll discuss everything. Today we'll be discussing the complete history of India-Nepal relationships. Now let's look at the HDI index. India and Nepal are almost on comparable terms. India is at 129 and Nepal is at 147. So this is not shameful for them. This is actually shameful for us. And as of now, since 2008, when Nepal became a republic from a monarchy, Nepal has actually borrowed its entire constitutional practices from India. Most of the constitutional practices of Nepal are from India. I would urge you to actually go and read more about how the politics in Nepal run. So primarily there are three parties. All right, two of them are major. They both believe in democracy, but one is on the left side and the another one on the right side. So right now also the tussle is actually going on between the left and the right, and each party is actually start taking the side of nationalism or hatred towards India to actually further its interest in the Nepalese community. Now, both these nations have parliament as their legislatures. In fact, Nepalese parliament is very similar to Indian parliament. The judicial system is also very similar to India. They have a Supreme Court followed by 7 high courts. So Nepal is divided into 7 provinces and followed by approximately a couple of 100 district courts also. Now let's begin and know more about Nepal. As you can see, it's our Himalayan neighbor. The Great Himalayan Range runs through Nepal. All right. And in fact, Nepal is home to 8 out of 10 tallest mountain peaks of the world. This whole area is a Great Himalayan region, and Nepal actually goes through that Great Himalayan region. Today, I will also be talking about why Nepal actually got this particular shape that it has. So, as you can see here in the map, Nepal is a completely landlocked country, which makes it extremely dependent on its both very huge neighbors. Nepal does not share an exact boundary with Bangladesh. It is separated by a buffer state of Sikkim here, and you will be actually surprised to know that the entire breadth of Sikkim is approximately 27 kilometers only, and that actually separates Nepal from Bangladesh. So Nepal has India on the south and north, all right, China up here, and Bangladesh separated by this small distance called Sikkim, right? So these are all Nepal's neighbor. It is a completely small Himalayan nation nestled between all these large neighbors, and that is why Nepal has to tread on its foreign policy very delicately. And one mistake, one time it actually enrages any of its two neighbors, it is completely blocked from the rest of the world in terms of trade, in terms of any import that is beneficial or that is useful for Nepal's economy. And we'll see how India has actually implemented a blockade 2 times on Nepal, the very recent one being in 2015. Now, let's focus a little bit more on Nepal actually. Okay, guys, any doubts as of now? Please let me know. Good morning, everybody. Okay, let's come here. Nepal is actually an emerging economy. Just like India, it's one of the fastest growing economies in the world, with growth rates recorded at approximately 6%, all right, per annum in 2018. It is actually stated to have a growth rate of 7% per annum in 2019, but let's see how the corona crisis goes on, and then we'll actually come up with the final figure. Its economy is completely based on tourism and foreign employment. So years of political turmoil actually lost Nepal a huge loss in the economic terms because there was no jobs available. So Nepalis are very famous and very hardworking people. They are found all around the world, especially in India. They come and work in India. In fact, the open border policies with India have actually led to a lot of intermingling between Nepalis and Indian people. Now, that is the reason the entire Nepal economy actually focuses a lot on the remittances. Most of the males have actually moved out of the houses to work out either in India or to work in the Middle East, and the rest of the economy actually depends on the mountain tourism. You know how many people actually visit Mount Everest every year. In fact, this year it was in news for a huge number of deaths on the Mount Everest, and the huge amount of plastic waste, huge amount of non-ecological waste that is there on the Mount Everest. Now, in the defense terms, Nepal has the 5th largest army in South Asia, and its Gurkhas, they are known as the fighting warriors, are extremely famous for their fighting prowess. Now, I will tell you a little bit of historical fact here. When these Gurkhas became very famous, in fact, we have our own Gurkha regiment in India, and that has been going on from British Raj. So, British and Nepal had fought a war between 1815 and 1816. Now, Nepal being a very small Himalayan landlocked country, Britain actually, Nepal was actually never captured by the British. It was also always maintained as a buffer state. I'll come to that. So, in 1815 to 1816, British actually had a war with Nepal. Alright, and you will be surprised to know it was actually Nepalese aggression. The British did not attack Nepal. Now, the British thought it's such a small country, small landlocked country with no resources, what will they do? And to their surprise, they actually, Nepalese army really withstood them well and was very, very strong. And the British army actually had to call in additional reinforcements to actually even control the Nepalese army from aggressing further. And finally, after much resistance, the Nepalese army gave in, and that's what led to Sugauli Treaty, about which is very much in news right now. Now, it is then that the Gurkhas actually came to light. That was then that the British realized that these small, small fighting people called Gurkhas are very, very fighting pros, and they really need to be in the Indian army. And that time also, there were open borders, and still there are open borders. That time there were no border restrictions, and now to completely open borders with Nepal. So we have our own separate Gurkha regiment, and that's the history. That's where the Gurkhas actually gained their fame from. Now, socially, Nepal is a predominantly Hindu country apart from India. Greater than 80% of the people are Hindus in Nepal. It's a birthplace of Buddhism, so very, very rich historical or cultural baggage is there. As you can see, a birth greater than 80% Hindus, being the birthplace of Buddhism. So it has similar cultural ties or similar cultural status like India. India is a home to four major religions of the world, right? And so is Nepal. Not four, but two major religions of the world having significant influence on the world community. All right? And that is why India is close both to China and to India. Sorry, Nepal is close both to China and India. Why? Because Buddhism is a major religion which is followed in China, and Hinduism is a major religion which is followed in India. And that is why somehow Nepal is actually able to maintain the balance between India and China. Yes, Shubham, it's a Hindu Rashtra. It actually recognizes itself as a Hindu Rashtra. And when the monarchy ended in 2008, it was the last Hindu monarchy anywhere in the world. Now let's look at the geography, because that is an interesting part that will tell us more about how India and Nepal relations actually pan out, or how India and China relations also pan out. Let's look at this. It is a part of the Indian subcontinent. Now, what are the nations which are a part of the Indian subcontinent? So let's go back to this slide. All these nations except for China are a part of the Indian subcontinent. That includes Bangladesh, Bhutan, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. All right. Indian subcontinent is so known because of its geography. So India occupies actually 75% of that area. And Indian subcontinent is so known because of the Indian plate, which actually collided with the Eurasian plate to give us what we know as the Great Himalayas. So originally, India was lying somewhere near Africa, somewhere down in the south. But as the continental drift theory talks about it, the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate collided and gave rise to the Himalayas. And in fact, that fact is very important understanding the 2015 earthquake in Nepal. So because Indian plate and Eurasian plate are still colliding, and Indian plate keeps moving above the Eurasian plate still at a rate of 2 millimeter per year, Nepal is a highly earthquake prone zone. In fact, if you look at India's earthquake zone map very keenly, you will figure out that the Uttarakhand region in India is extremely prone to landslides, and that region, that entire Himalayan region where we see Nepal, or this region, is extremely earthquake prone, including the J&K region. This region is extremely earthquake prone because it is a convergence area for two continental plates, the Eurasian plate and the Indian plate. All right. Now, we will also talk about this earthquake a little bit in detail, because that is also one of the reasons why Nepal is behaving the way it is behaving with India right now. Now, Nepal also has 8 of 10 world's highest peaks, and its area is minuscule compared to India. India has a 3.2 million square kilometer area, and Nepal's area is 0.15 million square kilometers. So it's a teeny tiny neighbor with very important implications for us. I will tell you why. Now, it is actually a landlocked nation between India and China, as you can see here. if you look at the map here, all right, you see that India is, okay, if you see the map here, you see that Nepal is actually between the boundary between India and China. Now, as somebody remarked, the thing is, Nepal was never colonized by the British. British were extremely intelligent. You know, they never colonized the states that were between them and India. So, India was their crown jewel. They always wanted to protect India. And at that point of time, Pakistan was included in it. Now, Nepal actually occurred between India and China. And China had a significant influence from the Soviet Union. And during the time British colonialism was going on, it was a time of imperial Russia also. So Britain always maintained Nepal as a buffer state or a state between two big nations, just so that Russians actually do not gain an entry into India through Nepal or coming through China. And that's why they maintained Nepali sovereignty and in fact recognized it as a friend in 1923 itself. The similar thing British actually did in Afghanistan also. They did not actually fight any war in Afghanistan. They actually wanted to protect Afghanistan from imperialist designs of Russia, and that's why they tried to have Anglo-Afghanistan wars to actually occupy the Afghanis territory, so that it acts as a buffer between India and Russia, so that Russia is not able to come to India through the Afghanistan route, through which most of the foreign invaders had come in the past. So India was very prone to attack from the northwestern frontier. So just to protect that frontier, they wanted to actually occupy Afghanistan, but they failed miserably in all the three wars that they fought with Afghanistan. But finally, they were actually able to install a friendly government who said that if they recognize Afghanistan's sovereignty, Afghanistan would protect them from any incursion that will come their way. So Afghanistan has not been a very weak nation since the past or in the ancient times. It was a very strong nation. It has only become weakened as of now. So it has a very rich heritage. Now, let's come here. As I told you, Nepal is a landlocked nation, and it is landlocked between China, India and Bangladesh. So that means any economic blockade by either China or India actually cuts off all the supplies to Nepal, and it can be completely starved off, which happened in 2015. For 2 months, India actually did not let any fuel truck pass through its borders, and which actually brought the Nepalese economy on its feet or completely on its knees. Now, Nepal shares a border with 5 Indian states: Uttarakhand, Bihar, West Bengal, Sikkim, and Uttar Pradesh. All right. And in fact, the Garhwal and Kumaon areas in the Uttarakhand have a very significant influence from Nepalese community. A lot of Nepalese community actually crosses the border from those regions and goes into Nepal. Now, you must be actually wondering, as of today, why are we actually discussing everything like this? Why am I telling you briefly first about the entire history of Nepal and then the history of Nepal and India relations? The reason why I'm doing this is you cannot understand the current issues that we are sharing with our neighborhood, the constitutional issues that are going on in Nepal, or the boundary issues that are going on in Nepal, without understanding the historic significance of the relationships. And since this course is predominantly for the mains examination, you are supposed to know the history, so that whenever you write answers, you're very clear, you have content to write your answers, and you are very clear why something is happening. So if this India Nepal part 1 is very clear to you, when I will be discussing the present day issues, that is the constitutional issues in Nepal and the boundary disputes with Nepal or the water disputes with Nepal, once you have the history right with you, you will understand why India and Nepal are acting the way they are, because that reasoning is all that is to know in the international relations. It's not the facts that you need to know, it's the reasoning you need to know. Because if you know the reasoning between two nations, if you know their geographies very well, you will automatically be able to figure out what might be the issues between these two nations. And that is why we are progressing this way. All right. Okay. Nepal is also a founder Yes, Oli Falls. Shubham, we'll talk about that later. Right now, let's focus on this. All right. So, Nepal is also a founder of international organizations. It has been a founder of SARC. It has been a founder of Non-Aligned Movement and BIMSTEC, that is Bay of Bengal Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economical Cooperation Initiative. All right. And NAM is Non-Aligned Movement and SARC is South Asia Association for Regional Cooperation. This was formed in 1985. This was formed in 1955 Bandhan Conference, and this was formed in 1997. So Nepal is actually quite active, but given the years of turmoil it faced at the hands of Maoists, at the hands of civil war, and at the hands of monarchy, it actually couldn't prosper well. But you'll be surprised to know, as we do today in Nepal's history, it has a very, very rich and very, very extremely prosperous past. Let's see how. Okay. Good morning, Srihari. Okay, let's see how. 18th century to 1950 Nepal. I am not discussing ancient or medieval Nepal. We'll be discussing it from medieval to the modern eras, the last part of the medieval Nepal. That means 18th century onwards. So the kingdom of Nepal was actually established in 1768 or the second half of the 18th century by Prithvi Narayan Shah. And in fact, there is a river named after him called Narayani in Nepalese and Gandak in India. Now the Gandak river is actually related to the boundary dispute at the southern boundaries of Nepal, or the Gandak river is actually related to the boundary dispute at the Susta point. Susta is a village which is right now, which actually keeps shifting its places because of the Gandak changing its course. Susta was earlier a part of Nepal in 1815 and now it is in the Indian territory in the 1990s or in the 2000s. Why? Because Gandak actually changed its course and Gandak is supposed to be the southern boundary between India and Nepal. So if this is the boundary, this is actually the Gandak boundary. Alright. Now, Gandak is also called Narayani after the king Prithvi Narayan Shah. Gandak is called Narayani in Nepal and Gandak in India. He was a Gorkha king. As I already told you, the Gorkhas are very, very well known community. They were warriors and it was this king who actually led to the unification and consolidation of Nepal, and based on which we have the present boundaries of Nepal. It is all because of this king Prithvi Narayan Shah who actually got Nepal together starting from the 18th century onwards, and that's why we will be studying about it in a little bit more detail. Now, India actually lost the Sino-Nepalese war in the later 18th century and retreated to its own borders. Now, this Nepal war with China was actually regarding Tibet. Nepal wanted to occupy the Tingri Valley in Tibet and actually expand its borders. So, when the Gurkha king was there, he had a very, very aggressive design. He used to attack and try to occupy neighboring territories, and that's why he was actually able to complete the unification of Nepal, which at that point of time was divided into many kingdoms. But this Prithvi Narayan Shah's kingdom, called the Biasi kingdom also, he was able to actually unify the entire Nepalese kingdoms and then started attacking the neighborhood territories. So that's why fought the Sino-Nepalese war in 1792 to 1865, which they lost. Then they actually fought with the East India Company, or the Anglo-Nepali war happened between 1815 and 1816, about which I just mentioned, with the East India Company to gain control over the bordering states, right? However, they actually wanted to gain control over Garhwal, Kumaon, over which they already had control for the last 12 years, Sikkim, and a little bit of our Bihar, present day Bihar, and Uttar Pradesh. What did the British do? They actually, these people, the Nepalese people, they lost the war and Sugauli Treaty was signed. Sugauli is a place in Bihar, alright? If you come to know, Sugauli is a place in Bihar where Nepal finally signed a treaty with the East India Company, and that was where they actually decided to surrender the Garhwal and Kumaon regions, the present day Lipulekh, Kalapani, and the Limpi Adhura passes that are in news for a very, very long time. So all these 3 or 4 regions, the Susta, the Lipulekh, the Kalapani, the Limpi Adhura, which are a point of boundary disputes with India, actually were given to India during the Indo-Nepali struggle. Alright, and right now, Nepal actually wants them back and is actually then denoting new maps, coming out with new things and saying that these things actually belong to Nepal, when it was actually settled in the background that Lipulekh, Kalapani and Limpi Adhura actually belong to India as a terms of the Sugauli Treaty. They were given to India by the Nepal, and the Susta also belongs to India. However, Nepal says that since 1815, Susta was on the western side of Gandak, so it should actually western side of Gandak, so it should actually belong to Nepal. And because the Gandak has changed its course, now it comes in India. So India says it will recognize the new Gandak course, whereas Nepal says it should actually recognize the 1815 Gandak course, and hence Susta should belong to Nepal. But Susta is actually not a still big fight between India and Nepal, because Susta is a very small village of very few people. So actually Nepal and India don't believe in fighting over Susta a lot. But Lipulekh Pass is a very important strategic pass. It comes between the tri-junction of India, Nepal and China. And India actually opened the Lipulekh Pass again. So India has always had sovereignty over the Lipulekh Pass. And India opened the Lipulekh Pass again with China in 1991 for doing trade, which was closed in 1962 due to the Indo-Chinese War. Even at that time, Nepal had its reservations but did not pick up the fight with India then. It raised its reservation in 1998 only. And since then, it was discussed that this issue will be actually discussed bilaterally and we'll close it. But this boundary issue has been festering for a long time, which has now raised its head again, about which we'll discuss more in the second video. Alright? Yes, Mansarovar is the region which you can access through the Lipulekh Pass. So it's very important pilgrimage path for Indians to go to the Kailash Mansarovar. They use the Lipulekh Pass for that. You're right. Now, what happened after the Sugauli Treaty? Prithviraj Narayan Shahs, or the Shah dynasty, was actually thrown up in 1846, alright, by Jang Bahadur Rana. Now, why was this dynasty thrown up? You already recognize that the Gurkhas were very aggressive, and the Nepalis actually recognize that these people are very aggressive, and time and again they will try to attack us again. So why not put a more friendly king in place of the Gurkhas, as they had done in a lot of states in India also. They had put up their friendly puppet kings so that they would aid India. So they supported Jang Bahadur Rana, alright, and overthrew the Shah dynasty. And then the Rana dynasty came into being in 1846. Now these Ranas were very pro-British, and that was the reason British actually helped them overthrow the royal family. And basically, even when they recognized Nepal's sovereignty, they basically had a puppet king placed there. However, unlike what they used to do in India, they recognized that they will not influence the foreign policy relations of Nepal, and it is free to choose its foreign policy relations. However, that is actually how it appears. British still had a very strong influence on the Nepalese politics, though not domestically but internationally, yes, because it acted as a buffer state between India and China. And secondly, Nepalis were actually supposed to support India against any form of Indian freedom struggle. So while we were fighting for our freedom, Nepal actually did not support us then. The Nepalese dispensation then, that the Rana dynasty, actually supported the British in curbing down the Indian rebellion of 1857, or the first war of Indian independence in 1857. And in recognition of the same, British gifted Nepal some parts of India as a gesture for Rana's cooperation, and later signed an agreement of friendship in 1923. So as back as 1923, Nepal was recognized as a nation state by the British, which is very significant. That means Nepal was never colonized. In fact, it was given a sovereign nation status by the British, which was one of the ruling powers of that times. So it's a very important and significant development. Now, British actually ended up giving some parts of Kumaon and Garhwal. British actually ended up giving some parts of Bihar to Nepal. which it thought actually belonged to Nepal culturally or historically. But still, the parts of Lipu Lake, Kalapani, Limpi Adhura, and Susta still actually belong to India since those ancient times, or since those modern history times. Now let's come to 1950s. How the dynamics changed after India got independence. India was no different than its British counterparts, but so India, what did India do? After Indian independence, India cooperated with Nepali Congress, all right, the present party which is there, and overthrew the Rana regime with the help of King Tribhuvan. So King Tribhuvan actually came into being, or the present dispensation where you had King Mahendra, King Dipendra, and finally King Gyanendra, last Hindu monarch in the entire world. So this dynasty actually came into being. Now, important point to note here is, why did India do so? So the Rana dynasty was very pro-British. So we already understood their designs that these people are never going to support India in its quest for independence, in its quest for development, because they've always been pro-British. So they will always create a problem. So India did a similar thing what British did. We installed a government which is friendlier to us. We did the same thing in Bangladesh also. So you cannot actually call it colonialism, but every nation goes after to secure its own interest, and we were securing our own interest with Nepal because it's a very, very close neighbor ally. Now, with India's help, we finally overthrew the Rana regime, which was not favorable to us, and helped King Tribhuvan, who was favorable to us, in his place. However, in 1960, King Mahendra of the same dynasty scrapped the democracy and a partyless panchayat system was made to govern Nepal. Now, it will be interesting to know that Nepal has shunned democracy not once but twice. Once in 1960, the king overtook the entire democratic powers in his hands and the country was no more a democracy, which was actually good for Indian interest because then you can go and talk to them. It became a monarchy, and that happened again back in 2005, about which I'll discuss further. Now, India actually tried to install a democratic government in Nepal because, as I told you, go back to the first principles when I was teaching you about the international relations, and I have time and again told you that political systems or the political philosophy of a nation is a very, very important determinant in the relationships or foreign relationships. So if you have similar kind of political philosophy or similar kind of political structure, it's actually easier to deal with the nation. So we wanted a democracy in Nepal so that we could actually go and talk to the government there. But then the democracy got scrapped and King Mahendra came to power and Nepal became a monarchy or Hindu monarchy in 1960s. So Shubham, your answer is, we'll discuss that in the later part of the video. Nepal and India have always been on very good terms. So you actually cannot term it either as a friend or as an enemy. And in fact, apart from Pakistan, which we have openly declared as a hostile nation, for no other nation we have said that they are completely our enemies. Alright, there might be border skirmishes, which happens with Nepal, which happens with Sri Lanka, which happens with China, which even happens with Bangladesh. But we are more or less able to resolve it diplomatically, and we actually do not end up tagging our countries. For you to actually tag the countries, you require to know the entire international relations in and out. So as of now, my only request to all my students is, please don't make any rash judgments about any country. Your job as a civil servant is to be extremely neutral in dealing with all these issues and simply getting an understanding or an overview of them so that you can write about them in the exams. Your job is not to make judgments on India's relations with any of the countries. So please refrain from them. These questions cannot be answered because they are not out diplomatically. So nobody can clearly answer them. Even if you ask the Indian foreign officers, they will not give you a very clear reply on that. All right? Okay. Let's come to the next part in 1950s. Are we good till now? Any doubts till now? Anything that you guys want to ask? Anything that you guys want to ask? Okay. Let's come to the next part. Now, 1960s, the democracy was overthrown and we had a monarchy. In 1990s, again, People did not like the monarchy because no development was being made and it was still like a ancient kingdom, ancient Hindu kingdom. So people's movement actually caused King Birendra from the same dynasty of King Tribhuvan to accept certain constitutional reforms, and a multi-party democracy was again installed in 1990s. However, in 1996, the Maoist party or the faction led by Prachanda, who also became Nepal's first president. All right. This party actually started to violently bid to replace the royal parliamentary system. They did. So Maoists, what do they want in Nepal? They want a democratically elected government so that there is equal representation for everyone and a government which works for the people. So they did not like the royal parliamentary system. And in 1996, they actually started their violent bid to replace the royal parliamentary system, which was put in place by King Birendra. However, in 2001, a very significant thing happened which completely altered the course of Nepalese history. What did happen? At that point of time, the PDF will not be there, Shubham, as of now. So you can make notes either right now or you can make notes later. After the live session is over, you can watch the re-recording, all right? Now, in 2001, a very significant thing happened. What did happen? That point of time, King Birendra was ruling Nepal. All right, there was no democracy, but there were certain reforms that were accepted, and a multi-party democracy or a royal parliamentary system was going on. It is said that Prince Dipendra, son of King Virendra, he was in love with with Princess Devyani Rana. He had met her in United Kingdom, but both these dynastic families, the Rana family and the King Virendra family, actually did not see eye to eye with each other. He wanted to marry her, but since it was refused, he massacred 9 members of the royal family. In fact, wiped out the complete generation which could actually rule Nepal, and ultimately shot himself dead too. That happened in 2001, and that happened within the palace premises when everybody had come there for festivities. Now, when that happened, King Dipendra also went into coma because he shot himself dead. He was crowned prince, but he died later. So finally, the last king of Nepal came into being. He inherited the throne in 2001. He was King Gyanendra, and he assumed all the executive powers to himself. In fact, by 2005, the struggle between the Maoist and the government was so much so that between 1996 to 2006 is known as the era of Nepali civil war. All right, and because of this time, the Nepali civil war, finally, King Gyanendra decided in 2005 that he will assume all the executive powers to the king himself or the monarchy himself, when the multi-party democracy was completely abolished, the royal parliamentary system was abolished, and it became a dictatorial state, which India did not support, which USA did not support, but China was still supporting Nepal then. So that civil war between 1996 to 2006 was fought with the help of China. However, by 2006, the Nepalese monarchy was completely exhausted, and King Gyanendra decided to relieve his throne and step back from his throne and make Nepal a complete democracy. Following the successful democratic revolution by the Maoist party, Nepal became a secular state on 28th May 2008, and it was declared a federal republic. And finally, by 2015, Nepal was able to actually promulgate a new constitution, and Nepal became a federal democratic republic divided into 7 provinces, about which I have already talked. Now, let's come to India-Nepal relationships. Any problems till now? Anything that you want to ask? Because if the history is clear, this should be a breezy thing. We have another 20 minutes of session left. So any doubts you can ask me. Post it in the live chat section. I will answer your doubts. Okay. Guys, India-Nepal relations are going to be a bit boring. Alright, because we do not hear much about India-Nepal in the international arena. But nonetheless, India-Nepal relations are very, very important for India to maintain stability in its northern borders. Alright. Thank you, Shubham. 1950s, what happened between India and Nepal? Okay. First of all, in 1950s, as we were installing, before we could actually replace the Rana rulers with King Tribhuvan, we signed the Indo-Nepalese Friendship Treaty in 1950 with Nepal, and Nepal signed a similar treaty with China in 1960s. So Nepal became friends with both its big brawny neighbors in 1950s and 1960s. Thank you, Pabaliu. Rana rulers of Nepal welcomed close relationships with India. They knew that the times had changed, the Britain gone. India was its new neighbor and it had to be friendly with it. So we actually set up diplomatic relationships between India and Nepal. In 1952, the Nepali Citizenship Act was passed, which allowed Indians to migrate to Nepal and gain citizenship with ease. That means it was the beginning of open borders with Nepal. In fact, I will tell you an interesting story. So, our cook was of Nepalese origin. So, he had the citizenship of Nepal and yet the Aadhaar number of India. So, he had both. We introduced him to the Aadhaar number so that he could actually use his social security rations here. And he also had a Nepali citizenship so that and right now he's settled in Nepal. When he got old, he decided to go back to his home country. So, he's gone back to Nepal. So it's a beautiful, beautiful relationship of open borders that we share with Nepal, which is very unique to these two countries. Something which happens in the European Union, but here it is much more happens with ease, and it's a very, very historic and very, very peaceful relationship that happens between India and Nepal. The Indian military mission was established in Nepal in 1952. So that Nepal actually always wanted India to be its side to support it geographically and to support it militarily. 1960s happened. During the Cold War, India became a NAM country. We were completely in the non-aligned movement and we were very, very big supportees of it. Nepal, even after being a founder, in fact, not just Nepal, a lot of smaller nations which were a part of the non-aligned movement was secretly tilted towards one or the other country, either USA or the USSR. So Nepal showed a pro-USA tilt and established relationships with the Israel, because Israel is greatly supported by USA because of the Jews. However, Indian government supported Palestine and was pro-USSR. We always had a little bit of Soviet tilt towards our foreign policy, and we supported the Palestine government in its bid to actually gain independence from Israel or to gain Jerusalem from Israel. So that time we were a little bit antagonistic, but that never really influenced our Indo-Nepalese relationships with a great force. However, in 1965, India withdrew its support, all right, to Nepal, and India was actually by then had a monopoly on the arms sales in Nepal. So China was never in the picture by then. China was peacefully developing on its own. China was not interested in what was happening between India and Nepal. So at that point of time, India actually dominated the foreign relations with Nepal and dominated the arms sales to Nepal. So India completely suspended relationships with Nepal and blocked the arms sales to Nepal. Nepal was again left in lurch. Now, can you understand a very important thing here? India is already 10 times larger than Nepal in size. And I do not know how many times, 50 times, 60 times higher in the economic prowess. And if you go on, keep on threatening your small little Himalayan neighbor, how do you think the small Himalayan neighbor would feel about itself? It feels completely violated. It feels that India makes use of it. It feels that India is taking a very huge benefit of its predominant geography. It feels that it is actually putting Nepal at a disadvantage and that Nepal should bifurcate its relationships so that it can balance out India's influence in its foreign relationships. So in all, we are completely destroying the beautiful relationship which we shared with our Eastern Himalayan neighbor. And we keep on sabotaging that relationship, much to our own chagrin and much to our own disadvantage only. So whenever we talk about India-Nepal relationships, I believe it is India which has to behave maturely, which has to make sure that its smaller neighbors, be it Nepal, be it Bangladesh, be it Bhutan, be it Sri Lanka, be it Maldives, they should not feel threatened by India's presence in the subcontinent. Rather, they should welcome having a big neighbor which can stand up to China and should actually coalesce with India in their foreign policies. That is how it should happen and not the other way around. Shubham, what do you mean by appeasement here? Could you please elaborate? I will answer your question. Now, Nepal asked finally Indian security checkpost, as we had established Indian military missions in Nepal. So Nepal said that, look, what you're doing with us is not right, and we want you to withdraw all your checkpost and all your liaison groups from Nepal. And India obliged. That happened in 1960s and 1970s. India said, fine, if you don't want us, we'll go. All right. And then in 1975, India annexed Sikkim, which became a state of India in 1975. At that point of time again, the king of Nepal came to India and said that, look, now you already have Sikkim with you and we feel threatened because this is how the Nepalese territory looks like. This is Sikkim here and then Bangladesh starts here. All right. And this is Nepal. So Sikkim was only the buffer state between India and Nepal, India and Bangladesh. Now, Sikkim here, it became an Indian territory. That means here you are supported, here it is India, here it is India, and even on the eastern flank it is India. So Nepal was then became landlocked by India at 3 places, and it became increasingly tense because of that. Because with China it did not have a very good relationship, and on the 3 other boundaries it was surrounded by India. So till the time Sikkim was annexed by India, Sikkim was an independent kingdom. And Nepal, though it did not have very good relationship with Sikkim, but Sikkim acted as a buffer state between India and Nepal. Nepal still had somewhere to go. But with Sikkim becoming a part of India, Nepal got landlocked by India from 3 sides. From its eastern borders, western borders and its southern borders. So then Nepal came again with a proposal, said that, look, we are a very, very small country. We actually like that it should be declared as a zone of peace. But this proposal actually did not receive much support from India. We were at that point of time in 1975 were busy in our own designs of emergency and of dealing with the external matters or devaluation of rupee. So we really did not pay much attention to our younger Himalayan neighbor. Since the Indian government did not support the proposal, Nepalis again felt threat from the Indian security forces or Indian security designs. Finally, in 1978, India decided to have a separate trade and transit treaties with Nepal, but it still said we will not have Nepal as a zone of peace. We will not declare it that way. India said you shouldn't be worried about any of the security issues with India. We are friendly, very friendly. So what we'll do is we'll instead have separate treaties of trade that you can have friendly trade and separate treaty for transit, so that if trade goes haywire, transit is not transit or transportation is not hampered, or if transportation is hampered, the trade is not hampered, and that's why we'll go for separate treaties in 1978. Answering your question, Shubham, yes, we were not actually following a policy of appeasement, but if you look closely, at that point of time, I think you haven't attended my previous lectures, the session 1, when I talked about how the NAM movement actually came up and Nehru's influence in foreign relationships. If you understand that, you will recognize that India had recently got its freedom and India had a lot of clout on the international relationships, and we were very supportive of all those nations which were trying to gain independence and had a similar situation like us. And that was the reason we were pro-Palestine. And another reason we were pro-Palestine was because USSR was supporting it and we were close to USSR than we were to the US. So that was the reason. Good morning, Tulsi. Okay. Let's move on to the relationships in 1980s. Bear with me guys for another 10 minutes and then we are done with today's session. Okay. 1980s, we renewed the 2 treaties, the trade and transit treaties. Trade and transit treaty. Transit means transportation or the ability to move from India to Nepal borders without any problems were not renewed as Nepal refused to accommodate India's wish for a single treaty. India said, why are we having 2 separate treaties? when we can have a single trade and transit treaty. Nepal said, no, we want different treaties because we don't trust you. So the treaties of 1978 expired in 1989 after 2 extensions, but no new treaty was signed. And that was a very, very bad time for India-Nepal relationships. And the first time India actually imposed an economic blockade of Nepal. Now you see, first of all, we actually blocked the arms sales to them in 1960s. Second, we have another economic blockade of Nepal in 1990s. The third time we again have an economic blockade of Nepal in 2015. If you keep doing these things with your younger sibling, your smaller neighbor in the neighborhood, neither the neighbor will support you, he will not trust you, nor the other neighboring or sister nations who actually see that happening, whether it is Sri Lanka or Bhutan or Bangladesh or Maldives or Pakistan, they will also see you as a threat. Whatever you do in the neighborhood, people start talking about it and they say that India is trying to have its very colonial designs. India is not a very friendly country. We shouldn't have good relationships with India. We are scared of India. And let's go to China to counter the balance with India. And that is what is happening right now. We screwed our own relationships with our neighborhood countries. That is the point I'm trying to make here. Tulsi, I'll answer that at the end of the session, right? I will answer every of your questions at the end of the session, all right? Okay. Finally, let's come to the next point. Then Nepal decided to impose work permits in Nepal. Now, compared to the economic blockade that India had on Nepal, what did Nepal retaliate with? Nepal said, fine, if you block our economy, we will block the work permits for Indians who work in Nepal, and tried to acquire weaponry from China. And again, China obliged and supplied it with weapons. Nepal also decoupled their currency from Indian rupee, and India retaliated by denying port facilities to Nepal. So if you actually closely see Nepal's geography, I want you to see that. If you see, the only access Nepal has, it's through the ports of Kolkata here, all right? That's closest to Nepal because Nepal is completely landlocked. So when Nepal said that Indians will have to get a work permit, India said, fine, if you want us to get a work permit, we will completely block your port entry also. That means you will not be able to get any of the goods that you require from the Kolkata port, which then travel to the various passes to the Nepal border or passes through the Uttarakhand boundary to the Nepal border. With that, India blackmailed Nepal. So we had a countermeasure. Instead of dealing with the issue bilaterally and in a supportive manner, we actually ended up blackmailing our small little Indian neighbor. Now, it will be interesting for you to know that Nepal actually pegs its currency to the Indian rupee. What do you mean by pegs? So the exchange rate of Nepalese rupiah actually depends on the exchange rate of Indian rupee. So that because Indian rupee is far more stable than Nepalese rupee, because Indian rupee is still, India is a bigger economy. So Nepal, you can actually go and have transactions in Indian rupee in Nepal. Nepal recognizes Indian rupee as a currency of exchange. At that point of time, Nepal was so angry with us. So like a small brother, if you have a small sibling, they'll say, okay, I don't want your things. I don't want anything to do from you. Nepal did a similar thing. They said, we'll decouple the currency from Indian rupee. And India retaliated like a elder brother saying, we will deny port facilities to Nepal, so do whatever you want to do. Now, in the past, in the 1980s, in the 1970s, it was okay. But with China growing in its power, we actually cannot end up doing all these childish activities with our Himalayan neighbor, because it is a very, very important strategic neighborhood. It guards our northern Himalayas, it guards our northern borders. We already have two unfriendly neighbors in the north, Pakistan and China, occupying our territory in Jammu and Kashmir. We cannot have another unfriendly neighbor in the greater Himalayan regions, and that's the importance of it. All right. Okay. Now, the last point. So, Nepalese GDP between this point, 1980s, declined from 9.7% to 1.5%. The economic blockade, the decoupling with the currency of Indian rupee, India's retaliation of not allowing port facilities to Nepal had a huge impact on Nepalese economy. And finally, due to this, King of Nepal was forced to implement parliamentary democracy, which we talked about. In 1990s, King Gyanendra led to the parliamentary or royal parliamentary democracy, which was finally overthrown in 2005 by the Maoist revolution, leading to 2008 Nepalese Republic, all right, or the final republic that we see in Nepal. Come 1990s, finally the relationships got better and they decided that they should move ahead after the economic blockade, and Kathmandu and New Delhi issued a new communique to finalize a lot of comprehensive arrangements covering all sorts of bilateral relationships. That means water sharing, electricity generation, economic help or aid. India provides huge economic aid to Nepal to the tune of billions of dollars. All right. And we decided to cooperate on a lot of other issues. 1991, the two countries again renewed their treaties of 1978 and signed separate trade and transit treaties in line with what the Nepalese government wanted. The governments also agreed to actually reopen all the border points, and Nepal agreed to various concessions regarding India's commercial privileges with Nepal. That means no custom duties on Indian goods traveling to Nepal and free flow of goods from India to Nepal. And in fact, you would be surprised to know that the trade balance between India and Nepal is hugely in favor of India. We export a lot to Nepal than we actually import from Nepal, though Nepal has very less custom duties imposed on its good which come from Nepal to the Indian borders. However, Nepalese people are free to come and work in India. It's an open border. 1991, India-China decided to open Lipu Lake Pass for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and also for further trade along this region. Nepal did not like it because it always had that wound festering from the past that Lipu Lake was taken from it by British by force and it wanted it back, but it did not raise any apprehensions then. Why? Because recently only it had got into good relations with India, and at that point of time India and China were also having very good relationships. So Nepal said, if this is the time I actually go and intrude and fight with India, India and China will come together, so this is not a good time to fight. So let me wait and let me find another time when India and China are not on good terms, and then I will go and ask for my rights over the Lipu Lake Pass. 1996, apart from the Sugauli Treaty, which was signed in Bihar in 1850, Mahakali Treaty was signed between India and Nepal, and it defined the commencement of the Pancheshwar multi-purpose project in Nepal. And 1990s was also a time when India-Nepal relationships reached to a new high, and various other dam projects were agreed upon by the two nations. However, all the developmental projects were put on a halt by India because, as I told you, between 1996 to 2006, okay, I'll discuss that, Shubham. So between 1996 to 2006, there was a lot of political turmoil going on in Nepal. Neither was it a complete democracy, nor was it a complete monarchy. So India said we actually cannot work in such kind of unstable environment, and they put on all infrastructure projects on halt, which further degraded Nepal's economy. Now, with that problem, Nepal has a very festering wound with India that, you know what, you start the infrastructure projects, but you don't complete that, and we are left in limbo, and our economy suffers a great deal, and we really do not like it. So as you are talking, Shubham, the next important thing we can do is we should complete our obligations. If we have said we will build certain infrastructure projects, we should complete them on time so that our neighbors do not suffer. Finally, in 1998, Nepal saw a good time to raise the Lipu Lake and Kalapani issue with India. It did raise the issue, and India and Nepal then decided that they will solve it amicably. They will take this up as a bilateral issue and will not include any other countries. However, when Nepal finally saw, when come 2020, recently, Nepal saw that India and China are not on good terms. It is actually the right time to hit India and ask for Lipu Lake and Kalapani back, because China is on their side. China and India are not seeing eye to eye with each other. So it is a good time to actually retaliate on that. And that is how this entire mechanism is going on. Let's go to 2000s. Okay. In 2000s, Nepalese relationship was again torn when King Gyanendra took over the entire democratic powers of Nepal and assumed himself all the executive powers. India did not support it, definitely, because we are a supporter of democracy. We did not want a dictatorial nation. And in 2006, Nepal's Citizenship Act was passed, which allowed citizenship to provide by virtue of naturalization. So if anybody is living in Nepal for a long time, or living in India, Nepali citizen living in India for a long time, they will be automatically given the Nepalese or the Indian citizenship respectively. When India was not being supported, India did not support Nepal in 2005. Nepal actually looked at China, which actually supported it. However, by 2006, the situation went out of hand, as I discussed, and 2008, democracy was restored in Nepal. At that point of time, India became a very, very important participant in Nepalese economics, in Nepalese politics, and decided to help Nepal formulate a constitution. I'm so sorry, Prachanda had become the prime minister, not the president of Nepal after the 2008 democratic elections. All right. Finally, in the later part of the 2000s, India and Nepal decided to revive and update the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, because now Nepal was a democracy and required huge India's help in formulating its constitution. India also extended a credit line of $15 million to Nepal to ensure supply of petroleum products. So we have time and again helped our Nepal relations. In fact, Shubham, since you were asking me, we are neither friendly with Nepal nor we are enemies. We are just two brothers of the same continent, you know. We support each other in times of need. We also fight with each other in times of need. We have security and relationship ties going back to way ancient past to actually be disturbed by little disturbances that keep coming in way. Just like you would fight with your younger sibling, or I would fight with my younger sibling, India and Nepal keep fighting and quibbling. Sometimes India shows maturity, sometimes it does not. But this relationship is actually supposed to go a long way, because we are neighbors by the design of geography. We cannot alter it. So we have no option but to support each other like subcontinental neighbors. Now, last one, apart from the $15 million relief it gave to Nepal for petroleum products, it also gave a US $2 million relief for the floods that were there in Nepal in 2000s due to the Kosi River. Kosi causes floods not only in Nepal but also in Bihar of India. Let's come to 2010s. India again gave a lot of credit, US dollar 50 million and 80,000 of tons of food grains to Nepal in 2010s, when Nepal was reeling under floods and all other sorts of problems. Maoists started dominating Nepal's politics, strengthening the relationship between Nepal and PRC, or People's Republic of China. So if you realize, the policies of Maoists are actually close to China. They are followers of Mao Zedong, who was the ruler of China, People's Republic of China, who also led the Cultural Revolution in China in before 1978, between 1960s to 1978. So Maoists are followers of Mao, and that's why, since Maoism was gaining traction in Nepal's politics in 2010s, it actually got it very closer to China. Now here again, the important principle of political philosophy comes into practice. The closer are your political philosophies, the closer the nations will get, and hence Nepal got closer to People's Republic of China, and that caused Nepalese government to actually have a distant tie with India in the 2010s. In 2014, again, India and Nepal got closer again and signed a deal to build $1 billion hydropower plant on Arun River in Nepal. Once completed, this power plant will actually generate as much electricity. This one power plant alone will generate as much electricity as Nepal generates as of now. So this is a huge infrastructure project that India is building with Nepal. However, the work is stalled there, and that actually makes Nepal very angry. But India never left Nepalese side. And when the earthquake happened in 2015, or in March 2015, India went ahead and gave Nepal a US $1 billion in aid to actually reconstruct Nepal post the earthquake destruction. India was also the first one to send medicines and all the medical help required for earthquake victims. However, the way India behaved, the way Indian media behaved in Nepal, Nepal took that as an offense to its self-respect. It said that Indian media actually treated Nepalis like a project. They treated Nepalis like a show. They treated earthquake victims like TRP ratings. And we are not TRP ratings. We are your neighbors. We are humans. And our feelings got hurt. So it was not taken very positively by Nepal. And due to this and due to certain other restrictions, for example, 2015 was also the time when Nepal was actually rebuilding its entire constitution starting from 2008, and India wanted certain other aspects relating to Maoist, relating to Madhesis to be included in the Nepalese constitutions. So India was supporting a faction of Madhesis for the Nepali constitutional maneuvers. Nepal had some other designs, so this again led to a conflict between India and Nepal. And as always, India resorts to childish behavior, and it resorted to a economic blockade of Nepal in 2015 for approximately 2 months, which again got Nepal to its knees. And Nepal had to get into friendly relationships with India again to regain its economic powers, or to regain its ability to trade with the rest of the world. Now, with these two events, actually, the earthquake events in which Indian media treated Nepali victim of earthquakes as TRP ratings, or they were not treated with a lot of respect, and the economic blockade of 2015 really soured India-Nepal relationships beyond determination, beyond something which was expected. And Nepal has been very bitter of India since then. It says that you keep meddling into our foreign affairs, you keep meddling into our domestic affairs, and you don't even give us proper respect. Who do you think we are? We are a sovereign nation. We do not like it. All right. And that's why finally in 2020, when on 8th May, India inaugurated a new 80-kilometer long road in Himalayas along the Lippu Lake Pass with China, so that it is easier for pilgrims to go for Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. Nepal immediately protested and said that you cannot change the status quo of this territory without discussing it with China. Because if you see the geography of Lippu Lake Pass, it is actually at a tri-junction between India, China, and Nepal. And up till now, it was closed by India. So India has sovereign rights over the Lippu Lake Pass. However, Nepal has now, without any rhyme or reason, started claiming its territory of Lippu Lake. Because China is again not having good relationships with India. Nepal is not very irritated with India. So they both have gone together to actually lay claims on Lippu Lake, and China is actually covertly supporting Nepal in its designs or in its fight with India. Now, what Nepal does not recognize here is that you cannot alter the geography. Just as India does not recognize this fact that we cannot alter our neighbors, Nepal also does not recognize the fact that you cannot alter the neighborhood that you share with India. And both these countries need to maintain peace at the border and resolve everything diplomatically. And following their protest in May 2020, Nepal released a new map in June claiming Kalapani, Lippu Lake and Limpi Adhura as Nepalese territory. Here I would like to mention, yes, now here I would like to mention what is exactly happening in terms of foreign policy principles. Both India and Nepal forgot that history can be altered, but geography cannot be. If we are to live as neighbors, let us live peacefully rather than fighting and quibbling with each other. Second thing, India, whatever happens with Nepal or whatever happens with smaller nations, India has to always remember that being the major chunk of the Indian subcontinent, it has to always behave in a very, very mature fashion when it came to its smaller neighbors, because due to its geography, due to its huge area, huge population and huge economy, it is often viewed suspiciously by its neighbors. And if we have to remove that suspicion, we always have to be very friendly and very supportive of our neighborhood, or our neighborhood smaller countries. Otherwise, we will ourselves send them into the lap of our big brawny neighbor China. That is the reason they start going closer to China, because India is not able to complete its infrastructure projects on time. Neither is it able to respect its smaller neighbors. So if you don't do that, there is another enemy of ours, China, which is waiting for them to come, which is waiting for our neighbors to come to it so that it can support them against India. The third thing that India needs to recognize is that you cannot meddle with the domestic relationships of your neighbors. India already believes in Panchsheel. India already believes in the Gujarat doctrine, about which I've talked in my previous lectures, the first two lectures. So when we believe in that, then let's follow that. Because see, in times like these, when globalization is the new norm, you cannot actually refrain or prevent your neighbors from going global and having relationships with other countries. All you can do is to maintain your influence, have a very, very healthy relationships with your neighbors. How do you do that? Invest more in their economy, invest more in their infrastructure projects, complete those on time, prevent having hostilities flaring up, prevent having economic blockades, and prevent actually blackmailing the smaller neighbors to actually give in to your designs. Because once and twice it is okay, but if you keep on blackmailing them, the neighbors will get wary of you and go to the other enemy neighbor. So we need to be very, very cautious. If you're not having friendly neighbors in the north with Pakistan and China, we cannot afford to have another unfriendly neighbor in our northern neighborhood with Nepal. Nepal has always been on very good terms. We have historical good ties with Nepal, so let's maintain that. So this India-Nepal relationships is something which is more to be maintained from India's side than on Nepal's side. And Nepal also has to recognize that when it comes to opening up its borders, when it comes to providing economic help, India is the first one to be there. China will never open its borders to Nepal to let people work in Chinese territory, but India has always done that. So if it wants to have stronger economic relationships, if it really wants its economy to grow, it has to recognize India as a big brother, it has to be nice to India, and it has to recognize India's limitations in supporting Nepal. With that, folks, as some of you had asked, so this is my Telegram group channel. All right, you can directly interact with me here, and I post all my upcoming videos and sessions. So Tulsi, if you're still with us, you can join this group link, because here I post all my upcoming sessions. This is the Telegram link. Here also I post all my upcoming sessions, so that you know whenever I'm going to teach on YouTube or on Unacademy. However, mostly for the IR sessions, I take my sessions at 10 a.m. in the morning, mostly regularly, but sometimes with a gap of 1 or 2 days, so that you can follow me on the Telegram group link to know when is the next YouTube session. And I also take Unacademy. I'm also taking free sessions on Unacademy platform regarding the prelims mock test series. These are special classes, so they are free for everyone to attend. The links are provided on my Telegram group and link channels. Otherwise, you can go and follow me on the Unacademy app. Type my name Siddhi Bangard and you can follow me there. So all my live classes, for all my live classes or for my recorded lectures, you will be notified on the Unacademy itself. So you don't have to follow around me for notifications. However, please do join the Telegram group link or the channel link to know more about the upcoming YouTube sessions. All right. Obviously, if you like the video, please subscribe to our channel. Let's crack UPSC CSE in English, and hit the bell icon for more notifications from our side. Use my code SBUS to get an instant 10% discount on our 1 yearly membership, which costs you less than 40,000. If you use my code SBUS, and a 2-year membership, which will cost you less than 58,000. If you use my code SBUS. For your benefit, you can also go and check out my free class on Department of Science and Technology annual report, which was a precursor class to my Science and Technology course, which I'm already running on the Unacademy platform, to see my pedagogy on the Unacademy platform, and to also check out our various important courses on the Unacademy platform. With that, folks, I'll close for today. And please like and comment and share the video if you like. If you like my IR series, please share the video with your friends. As many people should benefit from it as are possible. All right. Okay. Any doubts? Uh, Shubham, I wouldn't actually really answer that one. We'll discuss that in the next session. So in our next session, we will discuss India-Nepal relations part 2. All right, wherein we will be discussing the current issues that are festering between India and Nepal, the constitutional issue and the boundary issue and the water issue, or the various infrastructure issues. With that, I'll close for today. Thank you, folks. Hope we can call it a day. Right? Any more doubts? You feel free to post in the comment section. I will take up your doubts and answer your queries there.